Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Randy Brinson with the Christian Coalition of Alabama, and have the distinct pleasure and honor today to introduce to you guys Jay Mitchell, who's candidate for Attorney General. And we're so pleased to have Jay with us today. Jay, thank you. Welcome to our podcast, and so glad you had time to take time to talk with us about the issues that are important to the voters here in this AG race.
Absolutely. Great to be with you, Randy. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's talk about this race right off the bat. Some of the things we've been seeing quite a bit of contrast between you and your opponent, particularly in some of the areas that are important to Christians. We've known you for many years as a justice on the Supreme Court. We've known that you've been passionate about pro-life issues, and it seemed like there's almost this distinction between your record as far as pro-life and your opponent as far as their commitment to pro-life issues and even some of their donors. Could you talk to a little bit to the voters and the people on this that's going to see this broadcast, how you distinguish yourself from your opponent, at least on the pro-life issues to begin with?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be, when I'm Attorney General, Lord willing, I'm going to be the most pro-life Attorney General in Alabama history. And I have a body of work, a public record to support that. When I was a justice on the Alabama Supreme Court, I was known as a strongly pro-life judge. For example, well before the Dobbs decision came out in an abortion case, I loudly and publicly called on the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey at the earliest opportunity. In another major decision, I upheld Alabama's constitutional amendment that promotes and protects the sanctity of life. So I was definitely a pro-life judge. Coming into this race and thinking about becoming Attorney General, I'm very aware that even since the Dobbs decision came out from the U.S. Supreme Court, doesn't mean that abortion went away in Alabama. We're no longer having surgical abortions, at least legally, but what it's transferred to is chemical abortion. These are pills that are being sent across the state to women to abort their babies. And I believe that there has to be greater attention paid to this and greater enforcement put on this to make sure that we're not allowing abortion to increase in Alabama through other means. I'm very blessed in this race. I have the endorsement of Alabama Citizens for Life. This is an organization, Randy, you're well aware of. Tens of thousands of strongly pro-life Alabamians who have endorsed me in this race. They know that I am the true pro-life candidate in this race. My runoff opponent, by contrast, is supported heavily by an out-of-state abortion megadonor. This and your viewers can go and Google for themselves, abortion donor, Alabama Attorney General, and look this up for themselves as they do their own research. But my runoff opponent has received nearly $300,000 that we know of from this abortion megadonor out of state. And I'll tell you, this megadonor loudly attacked our state's toughest in the nation pro-life law back in 2019, called us hicks and backwards here in Alabama, and then gave a bunch of money, $250,000 to Planned Parenthood to build a new clinic in downtown Birmingham. I will tell you, as a strongly pro-life Christian, as a former judge, as a future Attorney General, I would never allow that money to come in and support my campaign. I will never allow the abortion industry, abortion donors like this guy to get a toehold in Alabama. We've got to make sure that Alabama continues to promote a culture of life and continues to uphold our nation's strongest in the nation pro-life law.
Well, I'm so glad you pointed that out, Jay, because I don't know if you remember or not, there was a bill passed several years ago, and before the Dobbs decision, you may remember that there was a bill that we passed in the legislature to require a physician that performs abortion to have hospital admitting privileges in the state. And the idea was if you had a botched abortion or if you perforated someone's uterus during an abortion, you should be at least held accountable and at least take care of that complication. I can't tell you how many times as a physician we had women that were showing up on the ER at UAB after botched abortions, and the abortion provider already gotten his money. He was flying back out of state to somewhere else. Now, what frustrates me, to your point about the chemical abortions, it's the same problem. if you're getting there, no one can be allowed to do this kind of thing. Nobody's allowed to basically prescribe. I can't prescribe medication or treat someone over the phone in another state. But basically, that's what you're doing. We're sending misoprostol from someone in New York to someone in Alabama to take it home, and they may bleed to death without any doctor supervision whatsoever. I can't fathom why people think that's okay, at the federal level or at the state level. So my question to you is, what do you think needs? How do we stop this at the state level with use of these agents such as misoprostol that are not necessarily safe? They can be very dangerous, particularly in some of these late-term abortions that are being used for things like that.
Well, I think we've got to get more aggressive about taking on some of the out-of-state, the blue state physicians and other entities that are prescribing these things and sending them into our state. We've seen Ken Paxton in Texas be very aggressive about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it requires a more proactive, assertive attitude and mentality in the first place. And then beyond that, look, I think we probably need to look at going after the websites and the social media sites that are marketing these chemicals to women in Alabama. I want Alabama to be the safest state of the nation for babies, to be brought into this world safely and to protect mothers. And that's going to be a point of priority for me when I'm AG.
Well, that's great, and I think you're very very kind in talking about these out-of-state donors that are helping with abortion. Mr. Culverhouse, for example, actually was given money to the U of E Law School, where my son went to school, wanted to be renamed, and the law school gave the money back because he was telling people not to even come to the University of Alabama. And this is the donor that your opponent is one of the major donors. I find that just terribly egregious, at least in as far as I can determine. So yeah, so we appreciate that, Jay. Tell us also about, for example, protecting children. You know, you've been very helpful to us. One of our causes about online, endangerment of children, whether it be predators using false themes online, whether it be things like roadblocks, whether they use games especially for children, yet predators prowl there to try to attract children, whether it be Gronk, where you're creating pornographic images of girls and being used across the internet, predators and pedophiles using that. You've been very strong in pushing back against that in support of our efforts of that. And yet we see now sometimes even with the Attorney General, at least previously, they were kind of timid in that. And I've even seen where actually donations have been going from these tech companies where there's being things considered like litigation, like with TikTok, before the Attorney General. That seems like a tremendous conflict of interest. Am I right to see that doesn't seem correct for someone to be doing that? That's supposed to be our next Attorney General, or taking money from these different people?
Well, I'll tell you, Randy, I'm a dad of 4 kids. I have raised teenagers and I'm raising teenagers right now. And my kids have grown up doing a lot of the online gaming with Roblox or Discord or, all kinds of different things. And I'll just say, as a parent, my wife Elizabeth and I will be married for 25 years. We celebrate our anniversary in July. It's hard. It's hard to be a parent in this environment. And your viewers who have kids and grandkids know all about it. I mean, you try to put these guardrails on there, you try to put these filters on there, but oftentimes the burden, the onus is being put on the parents or the grandparents to do it,
Mm-hmm.
to protect the kids. It's not coming with these protections built in, and so it creates portals and openings for child predators to prey on our kids and our grandkids, and that's just unacceptable to me. I think we need to be doing all we can in state government, and particularly from the Attorney General's office, to make sure we're helping parents be able to protect our kids. And when we have online child predators getting after our kids, look, my kids, I know from talking to my kids, the Roblox platform, for example, you'll have these chat rooms or little areas to try to attract kids. And my kids have been approached on Roblox before. It's dangerous, dangerous stuff, especially when mom or daddy isn't sitting there looking over their shoulder the whole time. So we got to make sure that we are getting after these online child predators. It's going to be a point of priority for me to go after them, to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. And then if we have platforms or programs that are enabling this kind of behavior, actively or passively, we need to hold them accountable too. We need to make sure we have, in the first instance, laws that have real teeth in them, and then make sure that we're going about enforcing that. I have seen MAGA AGs across the country really getting in that fight, and we need to be more deeply in that fight. And I'll just tell you, Randy, I'm getting in the middle of that fight, and I'm coming to that fight with the heart of a dad. I'm not going to allow these predators and those who enable them to prey on our kids. It's totally unacceptable to me.
That's very reassuring, Jay. The other area that you don't hear a lot about, but at least at the federal level, we've talked about waste, fraud, and abuse, for example, particularly in some of the federal healthcare programs. Have you have any ideas of how you might approach, for example, some of the things we've had problems with Medicaid fraud? I know our state's not been quite as bad as some, but there's still ongoing Medicaid fraud, both whether it be providers, other types of institutions that are probably abusing our Medicaid system that's so vital to our healthcare networks, and also other insurance claims. Have you had any ideas on how the best way to approach that, or are there better ways to approach that if you were as our next Attorney General?
Well, one thing I'm watching with great interest, and I think probably a lot of your viewers are, is the Trump administration's anti-fraud initiatives being led by Vice President J.D. Vance. There seems to be a heightened level of seriousness being brought to ferreting out fraud, exposing it, prosecuting it, and by doing so, deterring it. Obviously, we've seen a big effort made in Minnesota. We're seeing a considerable effort being made in California right now, and I think first and foremost, we've got to flow into that, especially where there are programs that are dually shared by the federal government and state governments. I think it's really important that we flow into those initiatives. Beyond that, what I would say is I think we've got to make it a priority. Where there's fraud occurring that involves stealing the money of Alabama taxpayers, we got to be willing to go after that. And I will have a zero tolerance policy for that. It doesn't matter what the threshold might be. Fraud in any amount can be gone after, can be investigated, can be prosecuted. And I want to make sure we configure the resources and the personnel in the Attorney General's office to make sure it's pointed at that problem, so we can tackle it as a priority.
Well, that's great to know. Like I said, you mentioned Ken Paxton in Texas. He was very helpful working with some of the federal task force on fraud and abuse there in Texas and finding tremendous amount of fraud within their Medicaid program within certain providers. So and had tremendous success in that area. So I think if you mimic what he's doing, you're probably going to make light years improvement on some of the fraud and abuse, even we're still seeing in our state. Lastly, I want to talk a little about competence. We don't talk a lot about, as far as in legal terms, competence and how important that is, particularly in our Attorney General. The Attorney General is the top law enforcement officer of the state. And obviously you're going to have cases brought before you. You've got to collect evidence. You've got to present that to a grand jury. You've got to make cases and things like that. And it takes a very seasoned prosecutor to do those type of things. How are you better equipped in that regard, say, compared to your opponent in this particular race for Attorney General?
Well, it is critically important that we have in our next Attorney General someone who has real and meaningful courtroom experience. You're right. We're electing the chief law enforcement officer of the state, the chief courtroom lawyer of the state. That's who we're electing here to this position. So it's really, really important. I spent the first 16 years of my legal career in the courtroom, in front of judges and juries, making arguments on behalf of my clients in big, complex matters. And then I spent 6.5 years as a justice on the Alabama Supreme Court, known as a very conservative justice, and handling the biggest, toughest, most complex cases that we have in our system on both the criminal and the civil side. That's why Pam Casey, who finished third in the primary, a very respectable 25% of the vote she gained in the primary. Pam's a career prosecutor. She's the DA of Blount County. And Pam has endorsed me in this race. And a big reason she's done that is because she knows I'm uniquely the only candidate in this runoff who has real courtroom experience. My runoff opponent has zero, or virtually zero, has a goose egg. To the extent she's been to court, it's been to observe. And I'll just tell you, I think it'd be really dangerous to elect somebody to be the head courtroom lawyer of the state who has no courtroom experience. It'd be like hiring a pilot. My brother's just retired from the Army after 24 years. He's a commercial airline pilot now. And it'd be like hiring a pilot to fly you across country who'd never flown a plane. If you were going
Mhm.
to hire a pilot, you want to make sure they've flown a plane before and had a lot of cockpit time, right? Otherwise, you're not
Yeah.
getting on that plane. Same in the medical profession. If you're hiring a surgeon, you want to make sure you've got a surgeon who's done surgery. And the same principle applies here with respect to the attorney general. We've got to have somebody who can take on and handle the biggest, toughest, meanest cases and legal matters that we have in the state. They're going to be really important, heavy judgments that have to be made about whether we file this case or whether we don't, how we defend the state on this and how we don't. What do we do with respect to Washington and the federal government in the courtroom? There are big, big things going on here, a lot at stake. And I'm fully prepared professionally and from an experience standpoint to go and handle those things. My runoff opponent, she's done some lobbying. She works in the office there at the Attorney General's office, but she doesn't have courtroom experience. We got to have an Attorney General who does.
Well, I can't speak to that even more better than you did just now, Jay. With you having a legal experience as a judge, adjudicating these cases, and also in the courtroom. I have a son that's, like I said, that's one of the top prosecutors in the Department of Justice, and it makes a huge difference whether someone like him is advocating for the United States of America, or somebody else that has less experience. So obviously, experience matters particularly, and that's very important. All of us need to know that, particularly when we're considering who to elect as the Attorney General. So thank you so much for that insight. Is there anything else that you might want to talk about as far as that you can share that we think the voters need to know about as in this upcoming runoff that we have maybe not covered yet?
Well, Randy, I just want to thank you and the Christian Coalition of Alabama for what you do. What you do in our state is really important. Advocating for Christian values, Christian principles in our political system, in our legal system, and what you do every day is really, really important. And so I just appreciate you having me on and giving me an opportunity to talk about these issues from that perspective. I think it's really important that we elect leaders who share those values, share that worldview.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly do, and who want to do things to advance our state. What I often tell when I speak with voters across the state, I'm all over the state right now. What we talk about is just what time it is in America. I think we all know the moment in America has shifted with President Trump coming back into office, and as Christians, as conservatives, we have a gigantic opportunity to really push the ball forward in a way that advances the founding principles of our country and can really make the country and our state even greater. So that's certainly what's on my mind. That's certainly what I'm going to be doing, Lord willing, as our next AG, and would appreciate all my friends in the Christian Coalition going out there and voting for me, Jay Mitchell, for Attorney General coming up here a week from Tuesday.
That's great, Jay, and we appreciate your time so much. And you're exactly right. We have to have people that are competent, but also have a moral compass as well. You need both. We need someone who has the right moral compass, right intellect, and right experience to take on these challenges, particularly in an office as important as the Attorney General. So we appreciate you running. We appreciate your sacrifice, your family, and everything you're doing this, and we appreciate your time to spend with us so we can actually get this information out to our voters. And we appreciate you, and our prayers are with you, Jay, on the campaign trail as well as your family.
Thank you, Randy. God bless you.
Oh, thank you.